Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're going to start the webinar in approximately 10 minutes. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to the 2019 National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week webinar series. National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week is a call to bring families together and individuals, community and faith-based organizations, industry, and grantees, which include state, tribal, county, and local governments, and many others. The goal is to increase lead poisoning prevention awareness in an effort to reduce childhood exposure to lead. HUD's Office of Lead Hazard Control in Healthy Homes, EPA's Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention, and CDC's Lead Poisoning Prevention and Environmental Health Tracking Branch collaborate annually on this observance. The webinars are also supported by USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture and the National Healthy Homes Partnership. For more information about this webinar series and National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week, you can visit the HUD website at www.hud.gov/program_offices/healthy_homes/NLPPW to get more information. You can also go to www.hud.gov and you will see a link on that main website to the National Lead Poisoning Prevention website. Today's webinar, if I can advance the slide here, is Consumer Outreach Ideas for Lead Programs. The presenter is actually myself, Michael Goldschmidt, Director of the National Healthy Homes Partnership. We are pleased that you've joined us for this event. This webinar will last approximately 30 minutes with 15 minutes at the end for questions. At the end of the webinar, you will be given information on links to additional resources for your program. We will be recording this webinar and posting it for you for viewing later if you prefer. We're also recording it so that if you have others in your offices or organizations that you work with, it would be available to you in the future. Your microphone is muted during the entire presentation so that we don't get a lot of extra noise and feedback. If you have questions during the presentation that I'm making, you can use the questions window and type in your questions. Because I'm also presenting and reading the questions, it may take a little bit of time for me to see that there's a question there. What I will do is at the end of my presentation, I will look for the questions and then try to answer them to the best of my ability. So again, please do use the questions window for any comments you have. So let's go ahead and begin. So a little bit about this program. The Healthy Homes Partnership is actually a program funded by the HUD Office of Lead Hazard Control through an interagency agreement with USDA, NIFA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture. We are extension and outreach educators. For those of you that may not be familiar with what an extension outreach educator is, this goes back to the mandate for land grant institutions, literally back to the era of Lincoln, just right around the time of the Civil War. There was legislation and laws passed that basically established land grant institutions, state universities in each of the 50 states, which of course there weren't 50 back then, but in each of the states, there's required to be at least one state university. And as part of that mandate to get that university, the mandate was that you also had to have people who are there not only in an academic capacity, but have the ability to take the information and research that is happening at major universities and then interpreting it and making it usable for the general public. So as extension outreach educators, we are similar to the agronomy specialist who comes and helps a farmer with their crop, selling and, a business development specialist. So the Healthy Homes Partnership is extension and outreach educators specifically focused on housing and environmental health issues. The reason why I'm spending time to talk to everybody about this is because part of what we want you to do as an organization is to reach out to us and make communication with us if you have not already established who your extension outreach educator is in your state. And some states have multiple educators. And the reason why is because we have some great ideas. We're doing a lot of work with healthy homes with lead poisoning prevention. And we may have some resources that are not available to you. You might have resources that aren't available to us. And we find that when we work together for the general public, that we can get a lot accomplished. So that's what we are. We are housing educators, environmental health specialists in universities whose mission is basically to go out into the general public and help them with their problems. In our case, it would be housing problems, and especially those related to healthy homes. The program actually started 20 years ago. We're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. We started at the University of Wisconsin, then it moved to Auburn, and then for the last 6 years, it's actually been here at the University of Missouri, and I've been the national director. So one of the goals of the Healthy Homes Partnership is that we do provide some funding to each of our extension outreach educators that apply for the funding. The requirement for the funding is they must not only do healthy homes and including lead poisoning prevention activities within the state, but they also have some national scope of work items. One of our groups runs the website that we have that we'll talk about in a second. One of our groups runs the newsletter that we do every month or every 2 months. So we have various people that do national things. But one of the other requirements that all of our states that are involved in this program must do is have what we call a Healthy Homes Coalition. This is an advisory board where our extension outreach educators are asked to go out and find the other organizations in their state that also have healthy homes outreach programming, and then try to have a meeting at least once a year to talk about common goals and objectives that we have to combine ourselves from activities. This is important because some of the consumer outreach activities I'm going to talk about in a little bit are actually not just us going out into the general public, but us combining with our Healthy Homes Coalition within the state. So it might be the state health department. It might be also a lead poisoning prevention program in a city in your state. So we combine the players together that are interested in and do outreach in this, and we get together, and then we do some, as you will see, some really fantastic and great things that we hope you will look at and say, hey, that's a really great idea that we could do in Tennessee or we could do in Colorado, because a lot of times we set these up so that they can be replicated in other states and other locations. So it is a requirement that we have these coalitions. This is actually on the left, the Tennessee coalition meeting a year or so ago, and then the Louisiana one is on the right. So almost every state involved in this program has this type of coalition that meets on a regular basis. Okay, so a little bit more about our organization, the National Healthy Homes Partnership. You may be familiar with us because of our consumer outreach guides that we have. And this is sort of the basis for some of the other outreach activities we're going to talk about later on today in this webinar. The picture on the far right may be the most familiar to a lot of you. It's the guide, Help Yourself to a Healthy Home. We actually produced and co-wrote this guide with the help of USDA and the HUD Office of Lead Hazard Control Healthy Homes. It was used for about approximately 10 years. Hopefully you know this by now, but in case you don't, on the left is the two guides that have replaced that guide. And one of the things we did as part of this project is we actually divided the guide into two different guides. So one in the far left is actually the consumer guide. It's only 12 pages. It goes through the basics of healthy homes. And then it has a very robust section at the end and during the text involved in the text that basically has additional resources that people can follow up with. The one in the middle is actually what we call the stakeholder guide. And the stakeholder guide, Everyone Deserves a Safe and Healthy Home, is for medical professionals, organizations like yourselves, extension outreach educators, anybody that basically is on the education end of healthy homes. And so even though your program might be completely devoted to lead hazards, this is a comprehensive guide about healthy homes that goes through radon and carbon monoxide. And of course, it does have a lot of information about lead and lead resources. So we produce and we edited and co-wrote these guides. They're endorsed by the federal government at USDA and HUD. So hopefully you're already using these guides, but the basis for a lot of the outreach programs that we have and ideas that we have that you will see coming up have to do with the information that is included in these guides. The other thing we have learned about these guides is they're very useful, especially the stakeholder guide for your program if you decide to branch out into topics other than what your original core topics were. So for instance, you might be a lead hazard, lead poisoning prevention program, and then you decide, we also ought to address radon. A lot of our clients also have that problem, but we don't know a lot about radon. How do we get up to speed on radon? This is a good guide to start that education so that you can be a little bit more holistic in your approach to healthy homes. One of the things that is inherent in these guides that's really important is what we call the Healthy Home Checklist. And the checklist is actually a self administered by the family, by the homeowner or the renter, a room by room checklist that looks at each of the rooms and talks about the kinds of things that a person should look for. So it might be if they have pets, it might be asthma triggers from the pet dander. It might be if the whole house is old enough to definitely check, surfaces for lead paint. It looks at safety hazards. So at the heart of that is this checklist. And again, that's going to be real important because some of the activities we're about to talk about go back to the use of these guides and the use of these checklists. But these are available online from HUD.gov. I'll talk about our website in a second. They're available through a link from us, and you can go to the link, download these guides. You can download part of these guides. At the back of these guides, I want to point out that there's actually some blank space on the back cover and on the front cover that allows you to put your own logo on this guide if you're handing it out for state fairs or you have a workshop you're giving. We do leave space for you to put your own sticker or logo on there so that you can actually put your brand on it also. Okay, so the second thing I want to talk about is sort of a portal to a lot of the activities and outreach ideas that we have with the Healthy Homes Partnership. And let me pause for a second. So I said I was going to answer most of the questions at the end, but I know that this question is going to come up, and I just noticed that that it come up. People asking if there are copies of the printed guides. HUD and us sometimes have a limited printing because a lot of people are using the internet and are using online resources. You can print them on your own if you choose to do so. So you can download the PDF and print them how you want. There are some times of the year where there is some printing budget allowing us to print hard copies. I'll talk at the end about how to reach me if you have a special request for the printed guides. Again, we do them in limited versions, so we can't do it for everybody, but we'll be glad to talk to you about how we would go about getting those. But we can get them printed for you if you choose. Anyway, getting back to this slide, I appreciate your questions. So on the Healthy Homes Partnership, one of the things we do have is we do have a pretty significant website. When you first go to the website, it is, I'll give you the link here in a second, but basically the website has, and the first screen you go to, it has this two-button choice. You're either an educator or you're a consumer and family. And most of what I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides are actually in the educator version. So although everybody has their own website about here's how to get children tested for lead, here's how to interpret the results, here's how to see your doctor about it. We actually have a sort of a dual portal here. And so the ideas I'm going to talk about are actually on the educator side. So you go to our website, you click on the educator tab, and what you will end up with is you will end up at a couple of places on there that talk about how to get a hold of us, information for educators, things like that. So one of the things I want to show you now, and you can write these down, but I can also, will show you on the final slide. But we have two different ways to get to our website. They both link to the same location, healthyhomespartnership.net and extension healthyhomes.org. They actually end up in the same location. That is our website. So I'll give you a little bit of a second to write that down if you need to. So healthyhomespartnership.net extensionhealthyhomes.org. One of the things that is on the educator side of this is this map of the United States, and you can actually go to the map and click on a particular state. And what it will do is when you click on a state, it will go to that state and tell you who our contacts are in that state. We do have people, there's 50 states plus territories. We do have people kind of change every once in a while. So if you go to this website and you click on Massachusetts, you'll get to the Massachusetts Extension, University Extension outreach person. You might get multiple people in the state. For instance, if you go to Missouri, you're going to see me there. There's also, you'll notice some states where there is, it's not linked like Ohio, unfortunately California. We do have contacts in there, but they're not necessarily through university extension and outreach. And so what we recommend here is if there is an adjacent state that has a representative, we usually can get a hold of them and have them do joint programming within your state. For instance, one of my associates here in Missouri actually does work in Nebraska. So it is possible to have people represented in your state if you want to have part of a coalition that's a multi-state coalition. Mississippi and Louisiana do a lot of work together. So we do have precedents where we do have these states that work together in a coalition. So just want to let you know, don't feel bad if you're like from Vermont and you notice that there's no Vermont representative there. But this is, if you go to the educator portal, you go to this, you click on the educator portal. One of the links that you have after that then is to this website to find out who is our representative in your state for extension and outreach. So one of the other things that is on the website, the Healthy Homes Partnership website, that is sort of the first idea we're going to talk about with community outreach that we can help you with. And that is, although you probably have a presentation that you make on lead poisoning prevention, or you may not have one, we actually have what's called the toolkit. And our toolkit is a combination of two really important things. The first is an actual PowerPoint presentation that actually covers the particular topic. So you notice on here, there's indoor air quality and lead poisoning, asthma and allergies. And so we have made for you, and this is again free public domain for you, we have made a PowerPoint presentation that addresses that subject with speaker notes at the bottom. So if you saying, you know, we really need to do this workshop, but we don't have a PowerPoint presentation, you are welcome to grab ours and use ours for that endeavor. Then the other thing is that along with each of those PowerPoint presentation is a very significant and thorough lesson plan. And the lesson plan actually goes through not only what are the important issues on the PowerPoint presentation, but it talks about other activities that you can do along with that. So I know we're talking today about lead poisoning prevention, but for instance, one of the activities that often is done with asthma workshops is having people breathe through a straw to replicate what it's like to have asthma. And so in the lead poisoning prevention stakeholder lesson plan, which you see sort of near the bottom on the link here, the lesson plan actually talks about other activities that you can do while you're making this presentation. So in the lesson plan, it has important information about the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, some prep work you might want to do, additional resources you can give the people in your workshop. It also has a post and a pre and post test if you want to do that for recording for your funding that you might get that might record them, that might require that recording. It also talks about, it has a speaker invite in there. So it's what we call a total package. So if you say, we don't have time to do this, does someone have this already ready that we could just pick up and go with it? That's what we have here for you. Now, in most of the cases, the lessons are, the PowerPoint presentations and the lessons cover somewhere between a 1 and 2 hour workshop. But I want to also elaborate on this because the lessons are actually divided so that they are very flexible in the timing. So you will see in the lesson plan that the one on lead poisoning has a 1.5 to 2 hour workshop already prepackaged there for you. But it also has, if you're doing a 30-minute workshop, use these slides and use this information. If you're doing a 15-minute talk at a Rotary, you know, do this 15 minutes. So it's very scalable, it's very flexible in how you use these PowerPoint presentations and lesson plans, so that there's hardly any audience that you would be approaching if you're doing a formal workshop or training that these slides and this lesson plan would not be usable for. Again, same thing before. We do have obviously some peer-reviewed, scientific peer-reviewed that we've done of these PowerPoint slides and the lesson plans. You're welcome to use them. There's room on the PowerPoint slides, there's room on the lesson plan to put your logo on there and your information to tailor it to your specific needs. The only thing that we ask is that that you do not change the slides in any significant way. So if we have a slide and you want to put the word Connecticut in there, that's fine. But if you change the technical information, we do ask that you come to us and talk about it so that we can work through that, because we will help you customize it for your state or for your specific program. But we just want a little bit of a heads up. And then again, we also ask that you keep our logos. You'll see the logos for HUD and USDA and the Healthy Homes Partnership on those lesson plans. So we just ask that you keep those on there because, again, the branding is really important in that respect. Okay, so this is very quickly an example of those lesson guides. This is only 2 pages out of approximately 7 on the one lead in your home. You can see it has the learning objectives. It has the amount of time that you would do for this. It talks about if you do shorter programs, how many slides and which slides you should do. It talks about, again, critical information, follow-up information, guides that you can download or print out that you would use for a workshop training. So again, we've hopefully taken a lot of the work out of what you would need to do by giving you this prepackaged, peer-reviewed, thorough presentation and lesson plan that you could use for any of your workshops. And so again, you don't have to ask permission to use it, just go ahead and download it and use it. The only time you would talk to us about it would be one, we just were interested to see if you're using it and how many people you used it with, but also if you change any of the content, just do check with us to make sure that we're okay with the kind of content that you're changing. Okay, this is an example of what some of those slides look like. And you can see, again, it's addressing lead paint. And again, I want to point out that sometimes when you get PowerPoint presentations, you don't get the speaker notes. We're really good about the speaker notes. So again, you can just look down here and you can see specific information that you would use as part of this presentation. Again, each of the lessons has a news release to promote your workshop, preparation suggestions, speaker confirmation, reporting, all sorts of things that just make it easier for you to use this toolkit. Okay, so the second thing I want to talk about with your consumer outreach is really important to us also. I realize a lot of you do have social media presence, but I want to talk about interfacing your social media with us because we can help you in ways that you may not be aware of. So we, in fact, do have a Facebook page for the Healthy Homes Partnership. We do have a Twitter feed, a Pinterest feed, Tumblr. We have a number of other ones in addition to that, but you know, these are the major ones that we are frequently working with you on that. On the left is actually the Facebook page. It's an older page from about a year ago, but it looks the same. But you know, you can see the feeds going through there. And on the right is actually the Twitter feed for the Healthy Homes Partnership. And if you type in Healthy Homes Partnership in the search in either of these social media, you will get to our page. But one of the things I want to talk about with our social media that's really important is we are very strong people when it comes to boosting. And if you're not familiar with boosting, I want to talk about it because it's an important part of what you might be doing on your social media. So for instance, if you have a lead poisoning prevention organization in, let's say, Colorado, and you're saying, you know, we're going to have a major event at the state fair in Colorado, and we're going to have a booth there, and we're going to be doing this kind of activity with kids, and we'd really like to promote it. If you let us know and you have on your own social media, you have the advertisement or the posting on that on social media, let us know about it, because what we'll do is we'll repost it on our website, and then we have the ability, not on all postings, but on specific postings to target that posting to a particular region. We've actually done this a lot when it comes to disaster recovery. So in disaster recovery, we know the hurricane's going to hit Louisiana. So what we do is we say we want this posting to not only go to everybody in the United States, but we want to target Louisiana so that almost everybody in Louisiana that goes into Facebook or goes into Twitter would actually see this come up as a promoted item. And so therefore they would actually have more likely, they'd be more likely to actually see that post. And so it would increase the exposure that you would have. So again, on a regular basis, but we can't do it for everybody. We can do it on a we'll talk to you about how we want to go about doing it. But for a minimum cost to us, we can actually target your post through our social media to a particular location. So one of the second outreach ideas that we want to talk about besides the lesson plans and the toolkit is this idea of working together with us on your social media exposure so that we can get the word out for your activities and your the great things you've done and the things you want to promote through our social media portals also. We do have a newsletter that comes out every other month. If you go to the Healthy Homes Partnership website, you will see a sign up for the newsletter. If for some reason you forget how to get to there and you want to just email me, we'll make sure you get on the newsletter. The newsletter actually documents a lot of these activities I'm talking about on the slides today. When we have a new product that comes out, when we have a new one of the states has a new activity or they have a statewide event they're going to do, we usually cover those in the newsletter. And then the newsletter also is a way of exchanging ideas between ourselves and technical information. For instance, as everybody knows, the HUD and EPA just came out with new guides on lead paint and how to work around lead paint, and we will use our newsletter to get the word out that those products are available. Okay, so now I want to talk about some specific programs that we have that you might be interested for your program. I want to start with North Carolina. So North Carolina State University, Dr. Sarah Kirby, one of our participants in the Healthy Homes Partnership, not too long ago actually created this amazing award-winning curriculum for 8th grade students. And basically, the idea was to promote knowledge of healthy homes to middle school students. They have 5 modules. You will notice that one of the modules is on lead hazards. And not only is it just a wonderful curriculum where students learn about some basics of healthy homes and lead poisoning prevention, lead hazards in a home, but it was specifically set up, and it actually has won some awards in North Carolina, but it actually meets the requirements of Common Core for science literacy standards. And that was really important to us. So if you have work that you do with various schools, especially middle schools, and you say, hey, do you know that this curriculum exists that you could use, and we'll be glad as our lead poisoning prevention program to come out and work with you on this module with the kids. This is now available to you. So it meets Common Core science literacy standards. It also has the tests and the outcomes. But one of the things that's great about it, besides the fact that for your school teachers that you work with, it already has a pre-packaged lesson plan, which I have family members that are school teachers. They love it when they can pull something like this and it's already prepackaged and it talks about all the different ways and the rubrics that they can do. But it's really some great activities. One of the activities that the curriculum has for middle school is they actually are, as one of the parts, they have to actually create their own booklet to teach younger kids, younger than themselves, or elementary school kids, about the same healthy homes standards. So for instance, I really like this picture on the right, which is from one of the students' books, telling the dog, hey, you got to check your water because it might have lead in it. So this is an actual student project you're seeing on the right from this curriculum. So it's got different activities for the children. Again, it meets Common Core standards. So it's just a wonderful outreach activity that you can have where you can go to various school children through your activities with them, or you can work with the teachers. And again, it's going to meet the requirements that they need, those minimum requirements for science. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, as soon as I can advance the slide here, is Oklahoma. So Oklahoma State University is our what we call our app expert. So we have created a number of apps over the years, and we really keep adding to that list. But I want to talk about two particular apps. There's a consumer app and a stakeholder app. The consumer app we actually advised on. It was done by another entity through HUD, but we did add some input to it. But I want to talk about the stakeholder app and the youth app. So we created two apps. They're both available on the Apple iTunes Store. Within the next few months, the stakeholder app will actually be available also on the Android store, and then the youth app will be coming shortly after that, where we can actually have them on both platforms. But what you're actually seeing here is on the middle here and on the right, you're seeing actually on the right a page from the Healthy Homes Partners app. And again, these are smartphone apps. And this one is actually for stakeholders. And then you can see in the middle slide, that's one of the pages from the youth app. And the youth app is meant for fifth, sixth grade, seventh, eighth grade, sort of in between there. It's at a reading level at that, maybe a little bit advanced in some cases for fifth graders, a little bit less advanced for seventh graders, but that's sort of the target audience for that app. In all of our apps, whether it's for youth, whether it's for stakeholders like yourself or for consumers, there's always in each of those, again, going back to the guides, a room by room checklist that you can have the children do, or if you're working with the family, say, hey, why don't you go through this checklist and come back to us and tell us what we have on there. It always covers the 8 principles of healthy homes. In the stakeholder app, and a little bit more catered to children in the youth app, we also have descriptions of the health impacts of what lead does to children and why it's important to get to get children tested for lead. It also has automatic hot links to additional resources. So if a client you're working with is using the consumer app and they see that they might have lead, they can click on it and go automatically to those websites on their smartphone. And because kids like the quizzes and the banners that they get from passing quizzes, both of those apps actually have quizzes that the people can take to show that their knowledge of healthy homes and lead hazards. This is actually a few screens from the youth app. Again, it was vetted and tested with youth. They really like the app a lot. It's got some great cartoon characters, some of which are, like in the case of the pest, you can see the little bug there in the lower right-hand corner of the middle screen. But again, the information in here is very applicable to you. So again, this is readily available. You can promote it. You can, if you're working with children or you're working with teachers or you're working with other stakeholders, you want to say, hey, we should, really be making sure everybody's got a copy of this app. That's what it's there for. So that's one activity you can have, is to get people to use these apps. And again, these are done by our colleagues, our Healthy Homes partner in Oklahoma State University, Dr. Gina Peak. So again, you can see the 8 principles of healthy homes. You can see specific pages where it goes through very simple analysis of what it means to keep it dry, keep it contaminant free, which of course would include lead poisoning hazards. And again, you can see the room by room checklist here, a little bit about the health effects. So it's just kind of a fun little app for youth. So now I'm going to go into some other states and talk about some other activities. And again, this is going to start off with, we've already have this already done for you, to some really fantastic things at the end where you say, wow, I can't believe they actually did that. But all of these ideas are what we want you to think about as part of your programming. And so in Connecticut, one of the things that we have on our social media is we do have obviously postings about the different hazards in the home, radon, lead poisoning, things like that. But what we also did is Connecticut had a graduate student that actually was very fluent in sign language. And so they converted a lot of our information that we were posting on social media, including the 8 principles of healthy homes. And then we did these short videos where we had Hayden, who is the graduate student, actually do these in sign language. And it turned out that when we started to post these, they became by far the most popular postings we've ever had on social media, which led us to believe that not many groups out there, including us and you and everybody else, was actually engaging this community with with this information. So it actually became a really popular post just because no one had, I guess, done a lot of sign language videos that would correspond with the information that you would see in the guides or in other methods. So we can show you where these are. They're actually on our social media. But if you have a direct need for a specific one, we can help you find that one. But again, don't underestimate how important these actually can become, because we were surprised. I mean, we know they were going to become popular, but we didn't realize that like everybody that had any kind of interface with the deaf community, actually, or hard of hearing community, also just really loved these videos. Okay, so the other thing that Connecticut does a lot of is they do a lot of, in addition to what we saw in North Carolina, our Connecticut partners with Dr. Mary Ellen Welch does a lot of our children's guides, and they have various children's guides on various subjects. What you see here is actually the one on lead poisoning and hazards. And again, to make it just easier for you to use this information to work with school teachers or other youth that you work with, to just make it easier to access this information and use it. It also comes along with two other things besides the actual booklet and the guide. It comes along with a teacher's guide, and then it comes along with an activity guide. So what you're seeing here on the left is the product from Connecticut through the Healthy Homes Partnership, where it talks about lead poisoning and lead hazards, and it's walking through the children, again, elementary school level, through their house. You know, what rooms do you like in your house? Where do your parents sleep? Do you have pets? What are your pets' names? And then as they go through the activity, it ends up being a great education on lead hazards and lead poisoning. So as they're thinking about their house and why they like their bedroom, and they have a dog, and the dog's name is, you know, so as they go through, they can talk about their house, and then slowly the lead poisoning hazards emerge, and then they learn on it. So again, it's been peer-reviewed, researched focus groups with children, and we find that the children are really drawn to these activities. And for instance, you can see here that they're supposed to draw an outside picture of your house, and then later on in the activity book, it talks about, in that picture you drew of the house, where are the lead hazards? And so it really does engage the youth in these activities. Mississippi has this really great thing that they promote. It's one of our partners, Dr. David Buys in Mississippi, our extension outreach person. They have this program called A High Five for a Healthy Home. And although it's not specifically related to lead poisoning, lead is one of those items. It's actually the ring finger, but this to me was just, it's sometimes the simplest promotions end up being these gems that you look back and go, wow, that was a really good idea. So the idea here is that the name that you give each of your fingers has to do with one of the items on Healthy Homes. So the thumb, you know, being T, is temperature and moisture control. You know, first finger, fire and environmental safety. And then you see the ring finger is actually reduce contaminants and keep it ventilated. So obviously that's where the lead hazards the lead poisoning hazard would fall into. So again, it's just been a very successful promotion in Mississippi. And again, it's something that you can replicate, and you can look at and say, yeah, we could actually use that same idea. But a way of engaging the general public in a very easy to remember way is important here. So in Georgia does a lot of, and our colleagues at the University of Georgia in Athens, Dr. Pam Turner, they do a lot of great stuff and a lot of outreach. And one of the things that they did in the last couple of years, and obviously it's going to take a little bit of planning for you to do this, but one of the things that we do in extension, I don't mean just housing specialists, but all of extension. So we're talking about all the agricultural specialists and the business development specialists. But one of the things that the agricultural specialists do in most land grant institutions is they do soil testing. And one of the things that they realize in Georgia is, what if we take the soil testing people in extension and combine them with our housing specialists and our environmental health specialists, and let's give people an opportunity at the state fair or at this workshop to actually bring in a soil sample, and then while they're there, the person who's the soil specialist from agriculture can actually test that soil to see if there's lead. Now, again, I realize this is not the HUD endorsed, EPA endorsed, you go around the house and really do all testing. But again, it's a start. It's a way of engaging the public, saying, if you have lead paint, you may have it in your soil, so they become engaged in the process of getting their soil tested. So what you see here is actually at the state fair, and you can see that while the soil is being tested by the soil testing person, you can see that there's activities for the kids. There's a flyer that you see here on the right where it actually tells people how to actually do how to actually take a sample of their soil around the house. Obviously, this is in the garden, but it talks about how to be closer to the house, how to bag it up and everything, and then it tells them where to show up and where to get it tested. So this was actually a very successful program where hundreds of people actually participated in one event of just getting this free soils test. So we again are promoting it to suggest to you that this may be an opportunity to engage with university extension outreach people in an activity that ultimately leads to more knowledge and proactive look at lead poisoning and lead hazards in the home. A couple things, we're going to get into more advanced concepts here pretty close to the end of the workshop, of the webinar, so I'll be asking for some questions here in a second. But if you're not familiar with, if you're not from the Southeast United States, Louisiana has this incredible program called La House. And what's interesting is it originally started as a way of promoting disaster recovery and rebuilding so that people in the hurricane area, especially after Katrina, could learn how to rebuild homes and fix up their homes so they'd be more hurricane resistant. But by creating this house that they, again, it's an open building that people can come visit, almost like a museum of good construction practices, is this constant discussion about lead hazards. And so, it's one of those opportunities where you're bringing people in to learn about other things, but as they're there, they then receive the guide that you see on the right. And also there's a display within the house that talks about where in a house these lead hazards might be if you have a pre-1978 house, or especially 1940 house, and where would you look at these things in a home. So it becomes an actual display. So we know that a lot of states and a lot of programs can't just decide tomorrow to build a house as an exhibition. So a couple of other things that they have done in Louisiana, which has been successful. And I know that everybody uses PowerPoint and everybody uses online information, but sometimes what we found is that that's not necessarily the best way of communicating with all different types of outreach programs. So one of the things that Louisiana did is they did these flip charts. And one of the nice things about flip charts, and I can't speak for anybody else on this webinar, but there are parts of Missouri where I'm housed, southern Missouri, where there is no broadband, there is no significant internet access. And if I went down to one of these areas, tomorrow, I would have trouble doing any kind of linkages to the online things. So what they developed through La House is this sort of mobile flip chart. So you can see the one on the picture on the left, on the right side of the picture, you can see the flip chart that is on lead poisoning. This was specifically invented as a very low literacy illustrated flip chart. And they use it for not only various groups that they work with, but it also for groups that are doing English as a second language, they've been able to actually interface with those groups because, again, the pictures are pretty easy to interpret. There's not a lot of words on there. If you decide we're going to do it for a particular population that's English as a second language, you can get an interpreter there also. So it's just a different way than using traditional online services for these presentations and for this interface. So these are available if you were to say, hey, could we, get a, how do we go about getting a copy of the flip charts? We can get you in touch with the Dr. Claudette Reichel at Louisiana State University, and we can get you in touch and to sort of get you a copy of that. So a couple of other things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about a couple things that Tennessee is doing. Tennessee is doing something today that, had they done it yesterday or any day before, this year in National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week, I would actually show you pictures, but they specifically asked me, uh, Dr. Bonnie Hines and Dr. Martha Keel specifically asked me not to show pictures because this is under wraps for today. So later on today, and I apologize, but later on today in Chattanooga, the coalition in Tennessee, so our extension outreach people and the Healthy Homes Partnership in Tennessee, plus the Department of Environment and Conservation, plus a number of Department of Health in Tennessee, had this idea, which again I think is really great, which is, and it solves a problem that I just talked about with Louisiana and their flip charts, which is, what do you do with people that don't have internet access or just aren't, up to speed on how to use the internet, or how do you engage people that really need to know this information? So what they have done is, they're going to unveil this today at 3 o'clock Eastern time, 2 o'clock Central. A library in Chattanooga is going to become the lead education station, and the idea here is that when you visit this library, and then again, this is meant to be highly replicable. So you could say in, say, Montana, hey, let's do this in, Bozeman at this library. And if you have connections with them, we can talk about how it got set up in Tennessee. But the first thing that happens, you go to this lead education station. It's a separate part of the library, and in it are guides and resources in print, just like, reference books in a library, that you can go through and look at lead poisoning prevention and information on lead testing for children and how to interpret the tests and all the print information. And then there is an internet station there, obviously connected to the web, that you can then go to online guides and information, and they're all bookmarked, ready to go, so people can put in a word search and it will tell them where those guides are. It has a library nook in that area so that any specific information, more technical on lead or other consumer guides, would be there. So it's just a way of establishing, and especially I think for lead poisoning, it gives an opportunity to address an audience that we don't necessarily get to through our social media, through universities, through public schools. So it's just an idea. And again, the idea here is it can be replicated, to just set aside this one area of the library in any library that you can do this to. And then again, it can have a sign there for your organization saying, if you would like more information, here's the Montana Lead Poisoning Prevention Organization that you can go to. So it's a great way to establish a little kiosk, a little nook there to provide this information. And then finally, I want to talk about another thing that Tennessee did. I don't know if this is necessarily replicable in every location that you're working in, but it definitely can be replicated. We've done it in Missouri. It turned out to be a really fantastic event. But what happened was, so Tennessee is in the SEC, so is Vanderbilt. So during the homecoming game between Vanderbilt and Tennessee, they had this idea to actually have a doghouse or playhouse doghouse competition. So Vanderbilt built one, the students in Vanderbilt and the students in Tennessee built one, and they had to use the 8 principles of healthy homes. There had to be educational guides that go with it. So if you go through the Tennessee house that's on the left there, you'll see that that's the Tennessee house, and you can see it's sort of like a doghouse playhouse. But as part of that, they went around and would just talk about, if your house is older than 1978, there might be lead paint here on the windowsill and on the siding. And so it became an educational tool. And then they actually ended up raffling these off to consumers. And there was also a sort of a competition where people who were trying to buy these houses also had to have a certain amount of knowledge of healthy homes in order to qualify to get this free raffle doghouse playhouse. So again, it's one more example of where you can have a big event where you have physical, you can't do a house like Louisiana, but you can do a smaller doghouse version that becomes your promotional item for these healthy homes issues, and especially for lead poisoning prevention. So the last thing I want to talk about is we are recording this webinar. You can go back and read it or watch it if you have other people, but I want to keep on this slide while we're talking about questions, because this is my direct contact information. So if you were to say, I really liked what Louisiana did, or I really liked what Connecticut did, or I like all of it, you are welcome to email me, and then what I will do is give you links or emails to the people who created those activities to get you in touch with them so you can talk about how you might want to duplicate or replicate what they did in your own location, and they can talk about the logistics and the cost of what it costs to make those dog houses and things like that. But I'm glad to be sort of the portal at which you can interface with all of the different state partners to get that information. So if you want to know more information in the future about many of these activities, you can contact me if you happen to know, for instance, Claudette Reichel in Louisiana, because you're in Louisiana and you want to directly contact her, that's fine too. But the other thing I want to talk about is, we're here to help you. We are required to be part of the coalition of people that include your organization, but we also have extensive experience in consumer outreach and education through university outreach and extension in all these different states. And we're glad to work with you to help you with their grand ideas. Again, it takes a coalition to put together some playhouses and dog houses as part of a Healthy Homes promotion. So we're here to work with you and help you. So having said that, I will be glad to take any questions you have. I do have had a couple of questions that were given at the beginning that talked about how to get print copies. The most important thing you can do about print copies for now is just assume that if you need them right away, that that you're welcome to go to those links, download them, and print them. If you have a specific need in the future, then if you will let me know, like, hey, in a few months we're going to in a few months we're going to have this event, can we get some printed copies? The more advanced you give us of what event you're going to have, and again, we're not able to print thousands and thousands of copies for you, but if you need like 50 copies or 100 or something, talk to us and we'll talk about how best to get that to you. One of the questions that came in a little bit ago is talking about where people can get this slideshow presentation. I'm glad to share it with everybody. What I usually do is this is recorded, and then there's an email link that goes out, and then I will post these slides. It may be a week from now where I can post these slides on our website, and then if you've registered for this workshop, I have access to your email. I can send out a bulk email to say, here's where you can go to get these slides. So I'm glad to share those with you. Um, uh, there's a really good question that came in is on the Tennessee lead education station, how do they know it's at the local library? That's a very, very good question. And then the next question from the same person is through direct mailing, and that's exactly right. So here's how it worked in Tennessee. We've actually replicated in Missouri the same way, and that is most utility companies have a newsletter that comes out with that person's bill. It may not be the case in every state, but like in Missouri, through Ameren UE and the city of Columbia, and in Tennessee and some of these other states, if you go to the utility company and say, hey, we're going to do this lead station, this lead education station at the Chattanooga South Library, you might be able to get them to get a blurb in that newsletter that's out there. We also usually, when we have these events in Missouri and in Tennessee, usually get the press involved. So you say things like to the TV station, the radio stations, hey, we're gonna do this lead station. I'm glad to be interviewed by your news talk radio tomorrow to talk about it, and get the conventional media available to it, because even if people don't have internet access, you can in fact get a hold of them through radio and television sometimes. So the more you promote it, that it's out there, and then hopefully we have people that still frequently go to a library, and just through word of mouth, you're going to hear that this thing exists. So that's a very good question. Another person said that they want to incorporate the slides again. In the next week or so, you will get information on how to grab the entire slideshow presentation. So that's all the questions so far. So I'm glad to answer any more questions. I'll pause for a minute or so. In the meantime, I want to thank everybody that attended today's webinar on consumer outreach ideas through the Healthy Homes Partnership. Please do feel free to follow up with me. I also want to point out that there are 2 other webinars that HUD is sponsoring for National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. There's one this afternoon that's called Amulets to Zaprana. It's non-paint sources of lead in a home. So I encourage you, if you have not registered for that one, to register for that one. And then tomorrow, we have a repeat of a very, very popular webinar, which is Dr. Warren Friedman and Bruce Haber at the Office of Lead Hazard Control will update you on the lead paint safety field guide. And as many of you know, that's a new guide that was updated. And Bruce and Warren are really great about walking you through that guide and telling you what's new about that guide. So hopefully we will have you attend those future webinars coming up. Seeing that there are no more questions, there is actually one last question. Are you able to give webinars to specific groups focusing on lead poisoning prevention? Yes, get in touch with me later on and we'll get you in touch with how to access that information. One last question, again, if you are, needing to go somewhere, that's fine. I want to answer this last question. So there's a question about reaching families that are afraid that if they mention the lead paint that's in their rental apartment or their home, that there might be an issue and we have information we can give you on that, but instead of giving it to you in this webinar, if you can email me, I will get you in touch with that information. And then last question, and then we'll end the webinar, is people asking about what if they had a webinar yesterday that they missed, can they actually be able to view that? And the answer is yes. If you will give us a week, because we have quite a few webinars this week, on the website, healthyhomespartnership.net, and on the HUD.gov/healthy homes. On both of those websites, after we've done National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week, we do, in fact, upload all of those webinars so that you can view them at a later time. So look for information that will send you on how to access those earlier webinars this week that you might have missed. Having said that, I really appreciate all of you that attended today's webinar, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And on that, I will be ending the webinar.